So Russia could break the West and Putin could do it with a strategic revaluation of gold. Now we have Zoltan Pozsar, the sage of Wall Street, the macroeconomic legend at Credit Suisse, outlining a scenario of how this could cause gold to explode up to $3,600. And in fact, it could cause gold to go much higher than if the Middle East joins the strategy and decides to stick it to the West. So according to Zoltan, the United States has a major vulnerability that Russia can exploit, and it's their strategic petroleum reserves falling dangerously low. Now, if you didn't know by now, Joe Biden, our good friend Joe, he drained the SPR since the start of 2022 all the way down to try to push down the price of oil, right? Now, in fact, he released 15 million barrels just to counter OPEC's 2 million barrels a day production cut. And this is a one-time event that is as good as peeing into the ocean and hoping for the sea level to rise. But the big problem is how America's oil reserves are at a 38-year low. It is near the 1984 levels at only 387 million barrels of oil. Now, the oil was drained down from a peak of 725 million barrels, and that is a huge amount. Now, this is dangerous because the US is still a net importer of crude oil, importing over 3 million barrels a day to American shores. So the reserves now only can help cover energy-hungry America for less than 130 days. And let's remember that Joe Biden, he announced to the world that he would refill the reserves at $70 a barrel, but the price of crude might not reach that level. Saudi Arabia and OPEC aren't listening to Biden anymore, plus Russia could very well cut production to turn up the pain, right? And this will leave the reserves dangerously low. Now, Zoltan believes that it is this risk that will force America to fill up the reserves once again, which opens up a window of opportunity for Putin, right? Now, if Putin plays his cards right, and if Biden is desperate enough, he could be compelled to buy Russian oil to refuel the SPR. Now, you heard it right. And if they do it, we could see a dramatic valuation of gold. We'll also see real wealth start leaving the West and head for Russia. So we know the G7 price cap on Russian oil is still in effect, right? And as we know, Putin isn't going to play ball with the sanctions. He has said time and time again that he will simply cut production and stop selling to countries that impose the price cap. But this is where things get interesting if Putin decides to pivot and price his oil in terms of gold instead. Now you might say, this is crazy, Sean. It will never happen. Gold isn't money and it's too bulky to ship. But according to Zoltan, this isn't improbable. In fact, from what we have seen just this year alone, Russia could in fact pull this off. Now, Zoltan mentions how Russia and the G7 are locked in a battle for tit for tat. You invade Ukraine, I freeze your reserves. You freeze my reserves, I make you pay for gas in rubles. And the recent price cap could make Russia do the unthinkable and price their oil in grams of gold. And we know the price cap is set at $60, and $60 just so happens to be the price of 1 gram of gold today. So if Russia pegs 1 barrel of oil at 1 gram of gold, he can revalue the dollar against Russian oil. Gold becomes the new medium of exchange, which allows him to play with the pricing to break the West. So right now, Europe and US, they are facing an energy crisis, right? We know that. The EU is suffering from higher oil prices and the SPR needs refilling. So Putin could give the West an offer that they can't refuse. Putin could tell Joe Biden and the boys at the EU, right? Hey, how about I let you buy some Russian oil? I'll give you 2 barrels of oil for 1 gram of gold, and the West would be crazy to pass up such a deal because now they are effectively paying half in dollar terms for the same barrel of oil. So if a gram of gold equals $60 today and it buys you 2 barrels of Russian oil, that means the US could buy 1 barrel at $30 technically, right? It's a 50% discount. And according to Zoltan, if Russia countered the price tag of $60 by offering 2 barrels of oil for 1 gram of gold, gold prices double. And let's discuss why. Now, the power of this idea lies in the fact that this gold revaluation will be forced by the supply and demand of the markets, right? Market dynamics will cause the US, the EU, and the world to bid up the price of gold until the price gap closes. So the first 2 barrels of oil could be bought at $60, but the next batch will cost $65, and the third batch could cost $80, and the fourth batch will then cost $100 as it continues to go up, right? And it continues to keep heading north until gold gets revalued to balance with oil. We have investors and countries buying up tons of gold to drive the price up because between $60 to $120, there is a huge profit margin. And when the United States starts to buy oil, they'll be paying progressively higher prices, driving up the price of gold as well. And this is how the price of gold could reach $120 a gram or around $3,600 an ounce. Putin just has to peg Russian oil to gold and give the West an exclusive deal of 1 gram of gold for 2 barrels of oil. He will effectively set a new floor on the price of gold, and the market will beat the price up back to equilibrium. Now, on the surface, this sounds stupid, right? It seems Russia is selling their oil at lower prices and suffering a loss of revenue as the price of gold revalues upwards, and you would be right. However, let's not forget Russia has some of the world's biggest gold reserves, coming in at 2,300 tons. That's even more than China's declared amount, but we kind of know China has more. But this acts as a counterbalance to the amount of value that they lose in immediate oil revenues. In fact, Russia actually benefits more because as the price of gold goes up, their entire stockpile of gold grows in value. Plus, with every barrel of oil, they are stockpiling even more gold instead of dollars. They are hoarding more physical gold that is going up in price, right? So you got to think of it this way. And Russia's dollar cost averaging their gold positions as the market is going up, and they don't need to produce additional oil to make it happen. That's important. Remember, oil to the West is now pegged at 1 gram of gold for 2 barrels. The pricing is no longer in dollars. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, guys. What if the Middle East, or OPEC in general, decides to price their barrels of oil in gold as well? Now that will be a game changer. This will drive even further demand for gold because it is not just a store of value or commodity to be used in industry and jewelry. It is now money that can be used to exchange for the world's most important commodity, which is energy, which is oil. And this will drive more demand for gold because now it has become a kind of reserve currency that can be exchanged for energy. And if the Middle East decides to accumulate more gold and push up gold prices, they can simply exchange 3 barrels of oil for 1 gram of gold to the West, another Black Friday sale to the United States. And if OPEC does this, they will outoffer Russia, and they have even more oil reserves to stockpile a mountain of gold. They are also the world's top producers of oil, accounting for 35% of global production. And this will just push up prices even higher than $3,600 an ounce. But even if they don't, right? The Middle East is effectively de-dollarizing the world and diversifying away from the US dollar. We already have China calling on the Gulf states to use yuan for their oil trades, so it's not a stretch that they could actually choose gold as an alternative if they are afraid of pissing off the United States, right? And what we could see is the evolution of two markets for oil. One could be in currencies, which would be mainly through the reserve currency, right, the US dollar, and the other could be in physical gold, which would be a historic shift. But if you step back and take a look at the bigger picture, this gold revaluation is a masterstroke that goes beyond just pushing the price of gold up. And here's the deal. We know China and Russia, they are pushing for de-dollarization like never before. We also know China has been stockpiling gold, shipping it from the west to the east and causing physical premiums to spike. For example, China can do this because they can sell almost $1 trillion worth of US treasuries and use the money to stockpile gold. But remember that Russia can't because they have $300 billion worth of FX reserves frozen by the West. But if Putin pegs his oil to gold, the West themselves could start shipping their own gold to Russia. And it doesn't matter if the US uses their own gold reserves or reroutes gold from the LBMA or Switzerland to Russia. It is still gold flowing eastwards. And if Russia and China get their gold stockpiles high enough and surpass the G7, we could see a new gold-backed currency. It could really happen. I know this sounds outlandish, but it's not impossible, and there's most likely a bigger agenda that involves gold. You really have to think about it. And it probably centers around knocking the dollar off the reserve status. Now, this is obviously bad news for the United States because now we have a combo of gold flowing to the east and the dollarization happening at the same time, right? And that is a dangerous combo that could set the dollar up for disaster. Now, the United States can counter this move, but it will also be a very painful counter. And in order to stop Russia from executing this gold revaluation, Biden could immediately choose to start refilling the SPR tomorrow. And right now, the price of Brent crude has fallen to less than $77 or somewhere around there. And yes, this is higher than his $70 initial target, but buying now might close the vulnerability the United States has. However, let's get this right. If the United States does this, they have essentially thrown a massive bid on the oil markets. We are talking about almost 350 million barrels, which would drive the price of oil up dramatically. And if OPEC and Russia sees this, they could drive it up even further by cutting production. So the US, they are caught between a rock and a hard place. Does dear Joe Biden choose to squeeze the oil markets higher to fill up the reserves and prevent Putin from playing this gold revaluation card? Or do they let Putin peg oil to gold and fall into the trap of buying cheap oil to reserve the SPR? Because if they do this, it could just accelerate the dollarization in the long term. Now, this is a lose-lose situation, and the only winning move is to hope and pray oil prices suddenly crash and they can refill it at cheaper prices. So let's understand that this scenario is not 100% certain, but as Zoltan Pozsar puts it, crazy? Yes. Improbable? No. This was a year of unthinkable macro scenarios and the return of statescraft as the dominant force driving monetary and fiscal decisions. And what he's saying is that the East and the West, they're going to find inventive ways to try and control the world's monetary system. Now, the G7 is obviously trying to control it with sanctions and price caps, while Russia has been on the defensive so far. However, if Putin decides to do the unthinkable and price oil for gold, he could set up a scenario where gold returns as money. As Zoltan sums this up nicely, Russia's decision to link gold to oil could bring gold back as a settlement medium and increase its intrinsic value sharply. And if physical gold becomes so valuable, just imagine the amount of leverage damage this could do to the Western gold system that's full of paper contracts to implode, right? We could finally see a physical short squeeze in the gold markets. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Will Russia's gold revaluation strategy work? Can the United States escape this situation? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.